Welcome back to the Space Gulag, otherwise known as PPSW, and today we're back with another Star Wars theory. Before we go any further, go down below and join our Discord. We've got an awesome community, very active community. We just had 100 members yesterday, very awesome, great community. We're going to start doing community events. Also, subscribe for a chance to win one of 3 free lightsabers I'll be giving when we hit 10k subscribers. We're halfway there as we just hit 5,000 yesterday. Thank you for that. But as we move forward, chance to win 3 free lightsabers is coming upon us, so subscribe so you can get a chance to win. Anyways, let's get straight into today's video. Today we're going to go into the thrilling idea of what could have happened had Ahsoka Tano joined Anakin on Malachor. During the second season of Star Wars Rebels, Ahsoka Tano gets into a duel with her former master, though now he is Darth Vader. The last time she faced Anakin face to face was when he was rushing off to save the Chancellor over Coruscant, and she was going to Mandalore. Now, because Ahsoka is the individual that she is, this is going to be a very interesting theory. I really like how this turned out. I'm very excited for you guys to hear this. So, let's get straight into the story. The story begins on Malachor as Ezra and Kanan escape after Ahsoka cuts open Vader's mask. We need to address the immediate character change for Ahsoka here. This will not be the Ahsoka we know and love from canon, obviously. She hears the voice of Anakin Skywalker, and she turns to see those eyes she once knew so well. They're not blue, but they're yellow. Ahsoka told Anakin that she wouldn't leave him, not this time. Instead of Vader standing up and channeling the anger within him, instead of saying, "and then you will die," he tells Ahsoka that she has one more chance to join him, or she will die. Ahsoka sheathes her lightsabers as she force pushes Kanan and Ezra out of the Sith temple, and Vader walks towards Ahsoka and tells her that she will come with him. But first they need to escape. So the immediate change here is that Vader doesn't actually threaten to kill her. He doesn't decide that it's a better idea to kill her instead of asking one more time for her to join him. Ezra and Kanan jumped into hyperspace as Ahsoka and Vader escaped the massive explosion. Vader's TIE interceptor wasn't large enough to fit the both of them, so Vader called for a shuttle to pick them up. Ahsoka would be brought back to Vader's personal flagship, the Devastator. Vader decided he wanted to keep Ahsoka a secret from his master for as long as he could. This was the most important piece of this task for him. It was possible that he could undermine the Emperor and overthrow him. Vader remembered back to the days of when he told this to Padme before Vader was defeated by Kenobi on Mustafar. Vader immediately ordered his ship to Mustafar despite any other objectives or missions the Empire had pre-planned for him. Ahsoka was taken down to the surface of the planet where his castle stood. The entire duration from Malachor to the planet Mustafar, there was hardly a word spoken. Vader was silent in his own, he hardly spoke to anyone, and he was one of little words now. All that was heard between the former master and apprentice was Vader's breathing. There was so much that could be said. It had been about 16 years since the last time they had interacted. It was before anything happened to the Republic. It was before the Battle of Mandalore. Both Anakin and Ahsoka were in different positions in life then. Ahsoka was aiding Bo-Katan and her people as Maul was enslaving the people of Mandalore, and Anakin was one of the brightest members of the former Jedi Order. Anakin was heading back to Coruscant to save the Chancellor, and to only find out that his wife, Padme Amidala, was pregnant. Everything was different now. Silence filled the air between the two. It wasn't easy for either of them. For Ahsoka, she felt responsible for what Anakin went through. She wanted to make up for what she had done to him. She felt now that she didn't have a purpose in the galaxy. After Order 66, she was a wanderer. She felt lost without a friend, especially a friend like Anakin. Maybe it wasn't what she was taught to believe from the Jedi, but Ahsoka herself said herself that she was no Jedi. She sat adjacent from Vader. She couldn't look at him though. She was so lost in her emotions at this moment. She felt gone. All she knew is that she was with her old master, her best friend. He might not look like Anakin, the one that she loved so long ago, but he was in there somewhere. On Mustafar, Vader showed Ahsoka around. He wanted her to remain here until they were ready to kill the Emperor. Vader made sure to highlight the cave that sat beneath his castle, a dark eminence from down below. The cave was cursed with the dark side of the Force, and Vader wanted to make sure she were truly on his side. He made Ahsoka bleed her lightsaber crystals. It wouldn't be hard considering the white blades she donned were already turning away from the pure white they had, which the lightsaber obviously means purity. Ahsoka choosing to work alongside Vader changed her opposite of darkness appearance within the Force. Ahsoka welcomed the newly found darkness, and though it was against everything she was taught within the Order, she felt the power surge that came from the darkness. She had only seen it a few times while being Anakin's apprentice, but now, side by side with the image of pain and fear in the galaxy, she was consumed by this darkness. Vader was pleasantly thrilled to have Ahsoka by his side again. He wouldn't turn away from the darkness, but he would emphasize a change in motive for himself. Now that he had a loyal apprentice by his side again, he could truthfully be able to dethrone the Emperor and rule the galaxy himself. It had eaten him up for years, ever since he lost to Kenobi on Mustafar. He told Padme that they could rule the galaxy together, but she didn't seem to approve of it. She was gone, but it didn't mean that Anakin couldn't seek revenge against those who ruined the perfect life for him. Obi-Wan sat atop the list of people in the galaxy he wanted to kill, but the Emperor, he sat right next to him on that list. Just like when Ahsoka was Anakin's apprentice so many years ago, she would become the apprentice to Lord Vader. There would be basic regiments of intense training for Ahsoka. When she harnessed the darkness, she elevated herself. She never realized how powerful the darkness was. Within herself, she felt the embrittled rage that had been buried deep within herself for so long. But where did this rage come from? It came from the countless opportunities she had to make things right. She was never able to get over leaving Anakin and abandoning him. And though she was serving him at this point, it was no longer about making up for that. It was about taking a hold of the power in the galaxy and stealing it for themselves. Ahsoka was fully with Vader, and while they trained ever so brutally, she realized that there was no ceiling to the power that she could eventually achieve. Not long after their arrival, Vader would be summoned for a mission to another world, to stop another minor rebellion and murder a bunch of civilians for fun. Vader moved with haste, trusting that Ahsoka would continue her training with great effort while he was gone. She was already a masterful duelist and a whiz with the Force, but the darkness that she was allowing into her was already showing signs of taking her strength to extraordinary levels. Months would pass before Vader would return to his castle. Ahsoka had made herself feel at home in a place meant to represent Vader's greatest failure. When the two begun training together, it was like old times, but Vader noticed something different about Ahsoka. He saw her eyes had changed color. They were now yellow, and Ahsoka was now talking about how powerful with the Force she had become. An inkling of this reminded Vader about when he thought he had lost Ahsoka on Mortis. There wasn't a ton that he remembered, but the memory jogged his concentration while Ahsoka and him were sparring, and she cut into his arm. He dropped his lightsaber and looked at her, praising her for her hard work. He never did this for the Inquisitors. He always was ruthless with them, but he praised Ahsoka. Ahsoka knew there were something wrong, and so she asked her master if he were ready to complete his mission. He told her that the time to strike wasn't upon them yet. There were many more moons until the time was right to kill the Emperor. There would be several possibilities to do it, but when? When should Vader try to accomplish the feat he dreamed of accomplishing for so long? He didn't know. He stuttered off into the distance and went into his chambers and entered his Bacta tank as his mechanical droids repaired the armor that was damaged by Ahsoka. Ahsoka was relatively eager to kill the Emperor with Vader. She knew that this could begin to change things in the galaxy. Vader, though, found other quests for her to accomplish, like discovering more ancient Sith relics and eventually finding the world between worlds. Though it would take years to discover the possibilities of the Force, she would do so, but it wouldn't be without the power of the dark side. Ahsoka's power over the few remaining years would triple. The dark side of the Force did wonders for Ahsoka. Because she had balanced herself out into such an incredibly powerful Force user without the darkness, when she welcomed it, it overpowered the already powerful base that she had to work with. The Force powers she was able to wield were powers that even Vader wished to achieve. But Ahsoka found a way around that. She made modifications to Vader's suit over the years, nothing visibly noticeable, but they were modifications that allowed Vader's suit to handle and deal with certain Force powers and actually be defensible against others. Vader was ready to make a move on the Emperor, but he was summoned by Grand Moff Tarkin. Vader told Ahsoka to wait for his return. Vader was being summoned to Scarif as a massive battle ensued, as the rebel forces tried to locate and steal the plans for the Imperial file named Stardust. The file was the information regarding the blueprints for the Imperial weapon, the Death Star. Vader contacted his apprentice and asked if she knew any locations of rebel bases, and Ahsoka thought back to her time serving with the rebellion almost 2 years ago. The rebels had a crushing defeat, but there were many locations that she were aware of. She told her master of a secret base on Rhodia, and that she was confident that the rebels would be located there. As the Death Star plans escaped under Vader's nose, he made Tarkin aware of where the rebel base was. The Tantive 4, which escaped the rubble of Admiral Raddus's MC-75, was misleading the Empire. As Leia Organa made it to the outer rim planet of Tatooine, the Death Star was making its course towards Rhodia. Tarkin made it aware to all of his advisors that they were going to Rhodia to snuff out the rebellion. He made sure the technician crew was prepared for a single reactor blast that would be used to obliterate the rebel insurgents once and for all. All of the command deck on the Death Star was aware of this, and they prepared for the possible end to this insignificant rebellion on Rhodia. Rebels on Yavin 4 prepared for the worst. Leia's ship had lost contact with them, and with that the Death Star plans were lost. But the rebels had some hope. A deep space frequency revealed that the Death Star was heading in the opposite direction from Yavin 4. With the events playing out relatively similar without the destruction of Alderaan, Darth Vader kept Leia on board of his flagship and interrogated her there. As the Death Star arrived out of hyperspace, they found an abandoned rebel encampment, which made the Imperials rather annoyed at Vader's faulty information. Though it didn't matter, the strength of the Empire was being seen by mid-rim planets such as Rhodia. The visible sight of the Death Star was enough to scare the people of the galaxy into understanding and bowing to the power of the Empire. Luke Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi, flown by Han Solo in the Millennium Falcon, landed on the beautiful, peaceful world of Alderaan. Kenobi and Luke found Bail Organa, and gave him the plans for the Death Star. Bail's influence would surely help get more assistance to that rebellion. Which was reeling after their costly victory at Scarif. Bail would tell the two of them to travel to Yavin 4, and there they would be able to regroup with some more rebels. They agreed, and Han Solo, who waited, would chauffeur them to Yavin 4. Meanwhile, Vader was getting impatient. He was ruthlessly torturing the Princess of Alderaan, and he wasn't getting any information. He wanted to know where the Death Star plans went and where the secret locations of rebel bases were. She refused to tell him anything. Leia was extremely strong-minded with the Force, and even though she didn't realize it, it was prohibiting Vader from getting anything out of her. As Luke and Kenobi arrived on Yavin 4, Kenobi told Luke he wanted to train him in the ways of the Force. And without any missions to go on, Yavin 4 was the perfect location for Luke to begin his training with Kenobi. The rebels wanted to get Leia back, but Senator Bail Organa prepared for a way to achieve this. He used his diplomacy to call on the Empire. The Imperial Senate hadn't been revoked yet, and he was trying to usher more people to his cause. Because the Empire had his daughter captive, many senators, who remembered the times of the Galactic Republic, sided with Bail Organa. The Empire from within was crumbling. Bail was able to use the capture of his daughter to strike at the Empire's politics, and it worked too. After the Senate meeting, several Imperial senators walked up to him and started asking him about his cause. The Empire reluctantly gave Leia over to Alderaan, and Vader was sent back to Mustafar by Emperor Palpatine. Sheev was pissed that the Senate would be able to keep itself alive, rallying over the Princess of Alderaan. Palpatine thought he could blow Alderaan apart with the Death Star, and so he ordered the Death Star to Alderaan, hoping that Bail and Leia would both be on the planet. But the people of Alderaan were warned of an incoming attack that would blow their planet apart. The people of Alderaan fled the planet immediately, and eventually, as the Death Star arrived at a hyperspace, the entire planet was blown apart by a beam from the Death Star. Without the Empire's knowledge, the entire planet was completely uninhabited by the time it blew up. The people of Alderaan were peaceful, but they were now ready to fight for the rebellion. They made their way to Coruscant as Leia returned to the rebel lines on Yavin 4. The Death Star sat dormant, and Vader arrived on board to meet with his master, who was retreating from Coruscant for a little bit. But while he was gone, everything in his perfect empire would be uprooted. After Vader was sent to Mustafar by Palpatine, he brought him back to the Death Star to confide with him. The entire planetary population of Alderaan arrived on Coruscant, refugees of a blown-apart world. The people at the heart of the Empire saw the faces of the people who left their ships, all the displaced people with no planet to call home. The people on Coruscant rallied with the people of Alderaan, because if it happened to Alderaan, it could happen to them. Across the Empire, the people of Alderaan were seen, bravely protesting against Emperor Palpatine. Palpatine caught wind of this while he was on the Death Star, and immediately left for Coruscant. Meanwhile, on Yavin 4, the rebels caught wind of everything that had transpired. They decided it would be best to arm the people of Coruscant with the rebellion's most important weapon, hope. The rebels sent people with loud voices that could arm the people of Coruscant against the Empire. Vader meanwhile contacted Ahsoka and told her to get to Coruscant before the Death Star did. He was informed that if Palpatine couldn't rally the people back to his side, he would blow the entire world out of the galaxy. Palpatine didn't care for the planet, he just needed the galaxy on his side. The Death Star, from the rebel of Alderaan, entered hyperspace. The Death Star being in the core wasn't far away from Coruscant. It wouldn't be long before it arrived, but because of the mass that it carried, it would take longer for it to get to Coruscant. At the same time, rebels on Yavin 4 were alerted that Palpatine was about to unleash the Death Star in the capital of the Empire. If the rebels could stop this assault and seize the power from the Emperor, they could flip the Empire on its head. But there was one important thing they needed to do, and what they needed to do was stop the Death Star. Rebel squadrons had been studying the Death Star since the plans were revealed. They were ready to make this run, but first rebel forces went into high alert. The rebels around Yavin 4 entered hyperspace to begin their assault on both the Death Star and on the ground. The rebels needed this victory more than they did Scarif. This was the battle that could end not just the war, but the Empire's rule of the galaxy. Meanwhile, Ahsoka and her TIE advanced starfighter was making her way towards Coruscant through hyperspace. Everything was converging towards Coruscant simultaneously. No one knew this though. Palpatine ordered Vader down to his office to wait for him after he finished addressing the Imperial Senate. On the streets, rebels began to rile up the crowds. The protests began, and they were against the Empire for blowing up Alderaan. They began to worsen. It would soon turn into a skirmish between protesters and stormtroopers. There were those who were still loyal to the Empire, but they wouldn't be any use against the Empire's movement. There were still those who were loyal to the Empire, but they wouldn't be of any use to the Empire's movement. Rex, being one of the rebels who were in the crowds that arrived early, helped motivate people within the crowd to fight against the Empire. Palpatine and the Senate tried to motivate an unmotivated Senate. Boos rang out from across the Senate chambers. Not many people were on board with this. They believed that the Emperor had too much power at his fingertips, until the lights inside the Senate chambers were shut off. The power grid had been hit by a stray bullet. The protest turned into a riot as every able-bodied individual was taking up arms against the Imperial Guard. This unit was elite, but they were outnumbered severely. At the same time, a TIE interceptor could be seen entering the planet's atmosphere as Ahsoka made her way for the Senate building. Inside, Vader awaited in the Chancellor's office. Palpatine was furious. He had built all of this, and it was backfiring because he blew up a worthless planet. As he entered his office, he saw his apprentice. Palpatine walked over and sat down at his chair and thought momentarily. He turned his chair and looked out the window. Down below, he could see the fires, and he could see the blaster bolts in a firefight that was taking place down below. Coruscant's underbelly looked as if it were looking for this moment, a moment to try and seize the power. The Emperor asked Lord Vader about how much longer it would take for the Death Star to arrive, and Vader told him it would be here momentarily. The entire Imperial fleet outside of Coruscant's orbit began maneuvering away from the planet because they were aware of what the Death Star could be doing. On the surface of Coruscant, Rex and his rebel operative were leading a successful offense against the Empire until a swarm of AT-ATs could be seen in the distance. Rex had a plan to deal with this though, because there was no chance that these freedom fighters would be able to win with all those heavily armed walkers barreling down on them. In the office of the Emperor, news reached him that the Death Star had arrived. Tarkin was under strict orders to blow up the planet when Palpatine gave the word. As the Death Star had made its eerie presence known to the people of Coruscant, all the rebel fighters emerged from hyperspace. Their first response to seeing the massive space station was shock and disbelief, but the brave members of the rebels persisted. Rebellion reinforcements in the few U-wings remaining from the Battle of Scarif carried several troops down to the surface to aid the protest turned into a riot. The U-wings maneuvered through some tough flak before providing aid to the rioters on the ground. As rebels exited their carriers, X-wings and Y-wings entered combat above the Death Star, trying to prepare themselves for the trench run that each and every member spent time studying before this battle. On the surface of Coruscant inside of the executive office, Lord Vader stood silently. The Emperor knew something was off with him. As he got up to see what was bothering his friend, a force push sent him across the room, toppling over into his window, cracking the glass. Palpatine looked up. It was the former apprentice of Anakin Skywalker. She jumped down from the ceiling and caught Palpatine off guard, and he was not thrilled to see her. She lifted her lightsabers and threw 2 crimson blades across the room, cutting down every single guard that stood in sight. As the lightsabers boomeranged themselves back into her hands, she prepared herself by getting into attack position. Vader stood behind her, and from his hand, crimson emitted. Palpatine knew what side he chose. Palpatine knew that he had great power against Vader, and it wouldn't be hard to kill him, so he knew that the most important thing was turning Ahsoka against Vader. She'd be the perfect apprentice for him. Sure, she wasn't a Skywalker, but Vader was nothing compared to what his true potential could be worth. Palpatine didn't hesitate to use electrocution to try and turn the apprentice and master against each other, immediately going for Vader to only see that his suit wasn't shutting down. No matter. As Ahsoka leaped across the room towards him, he pulled her with the Force and then whipped her back across the room. Palpatine thought that Ahsoka would make a fine replacement, but she wasn't Vader. Even though Vader had betrayed him, and Vader's suit was upgraded, he would be more useful as an ally than dead. Ahsoka got up to join Vader again. They both moved into attack position towards Palpatine, but Palpatine was ready, twirling his blades in between the two, even in his old age, besting the two of them in combat. Palpatine was still as fierce as ever. He leveraged Ahsoka off balance and shot lightning into her, while he flipped and turned on Vader. Vader moved defensively, but Palpatine, as a sign of mercy, stabbed his blade into Vader's side. He fell to the floor in pain. Palpatine sheathed his lightsabers and put them both back onto his hips. Ahsoka was on the floor as she tried to get up, as the Emperor walked back to his seat. He shocked her with his lightning without even looking, and then force-pulled her lightsabers to him. He slowly walked back to his chair and called up Tarkin to withhold an attack on the planet. Meanwhile, on the ground level, rebels began pushing the entire Empire back. U-Wings were helping the struggle as they got an early advantage on the AT-ATs. But it was no matter, because it wouldn't be long before they got shot down, one by one. One of the U-Wings crashed into a group of rioters. As the AT-ATs filed single file into a massive corridor as they walked towards the riot taking place. Imperial stormtroopers and guards were being slaughtered. They put up stiff resistance, but in reality, for being the Emperor's Guard, they hadn't seen much combat on Coruscant. They had been sitting dormant since the end of the Clone Wars. It wasn't their fault for tragically falling to the hands of the rebels, but they also hadn't seen action in almost 2 decades. In space, a group of X-Wings with Red 5 led an assault on the Death Star's trench. Obi-Wan used communication from Yavin and reminded Luke to use the Force as they began their run on the turbo lasers. In the Emperor's office, it was silent. Vader's breathing wasn't steady and it sounded rather broken, but he rose. Palpatine told him he had one more chance at redemption. One of Ahsoka's lightsabers was tossed into the middle of the room. Palpatine stood up from his seat. He was eager to watch Vader restate his loyalty. Vader used the Force and pulled Ahsoka's blade into his hands as he stood shakily to his feet. Ahsoka was being held on her knees before Vader with the Force by Palpatine. As he, in the same style he killed Dooku, crossed the unlit lightsabers diagonally. Palpatine grinned. He could feel Vader make his move, twisting 2 blades to finally commit himself over to darkness. But then Palpatine opened his eyes. In his final moments he realized it was the lightsabers he had put into his robes. Palpatine couldn't react fast enough though, as the 2 blades cut through his hips to his shoulders, cutting Palpatine into dices as he fell to the floor. Vader looked at Ahsoka and sheathed his lightsaber. Ahsoka pulled her secondary lightsaber with the Force as she also was handed her primary one. Without hesitation, Ahsoka ignited her blades into Vader's chest, and in complete shock, Vader fell back. He was still alive, briefly. Ahsoka told Vader that she couldn't serve evil. She told her former master that she knew he could bring balance to the Force, and he did. It had been her plan for the past few years. Vader was in shock. Then Ahsoka told Vader that she was doing this for Anakin Skywalker, her true master, her true friend. Ahsoka closed her eyes and twisted the blades in Vader's chest, killing the Dark Lord of the Sith. Ahsoka got out her communication device for Yavin 4. She told them that the mission was complete. Vader and the Emperor were dead. Ahsoka walked over to the window and watched as the battle ensued on the ground. She knew she could do something to help. Meanwhile, Rex used a tactic he learned with General Skywalker and used jetpacks from the high ground to attack enemy vehicles, though this time he was on top of an AT-AT. It was the last one in the line of the convoy. He couldn't find a way in. While he was looking for an entrance, an old friend jumped up behind him. Ahsoka smirked at her friend. Her eyes were pure, as were her blades, as she cut through the uppermost part of the Walker's Bridge. Rex and Ahsoka jumped in and knocked the pilots out, as Rex took control as he asked where she had been. He thought she had died. Rex began blasting the walkers in front of him, crippling the Imperial artillery as Ahsoka explained everything that had happened. In space, the final moments came in. With TIE fighters beaming in on behind Luke and the rest of Red Squadron, a shot had to be taken. There was likely no chance that anyone could survive this anyways. As Luke spun in circles to avoid, and the rest of Red Squadron backed off to the distance to distract the TIEs, Luke used what little knowledge of the Force he had to sink the final shot, but it was into the wall of the Death Star. Luke pulled out of the trench and spun away. Red 3, on the other hand, was in the right trench, and when the shot went, it went the distance. And as Tarkin stood idle on the command deck, the Death Star exploded. The Imperial fleet that was stationed next to the Death Star was completely eradicated from the debris and the sheer magnitude of force that followed the explosion. Rebel fighters didn't jump to hyperspace though. They joined the fight on the surface, knocking out artillery and Imperial command centers. In the corridor where the main battle was taking place, Ahsoka and Rex destroyed the convoy of Imperial walkers that stood before them. On the ground, stormtroopers, realizing that the battle was lost, surrendered to the rebels and the rioters. The riots had been successful, and likewise the attack on the Death Star was too. The question is, what did Ahsoka tell Rex? She told Rex that she knew that she would never beat Vader. He was too powerful, so she decided that on Malachor, she would join him. Maybe she could convince him to turn, or just kill the Emperor. While Ahsoka was out in the galaxy voyaging around, she discovered powers of the Force, one of which she called Force Veil. She couldn't translate the text, but essentially Force Veil allowed her to conceal her identity. She adopted yellow eyes, and her lightsabers appeared to be bleeding, but all along she was still pure. Palpatine was the only one who saw through this. He saw a Jedi, and he saw Vader aiding her. It took Palpatine a moment to figure it out, but with his expanded knowledge of the Force, he knew the power from memory. In Vader's eyes, his apprentice had fully committed to the darkness. One final reveal told Rex that she had kept the rebels informed about everything that had transpired. She told the rebels about Imperial movements and strategies of where the rebels could succeed in an attack, and it worked really well. The losses at Scarif can't be blamed on her though. That was out of her control. It didn't matter though. The rebels had seized power in the heart of the Empire. It wouldn't be long before the New Republic disbanded the Empire and Mon Calamari began shipping out capital ships to stop the remnant of the Empire. During this time, Obi-Wan and Ahsoka would instruct the children of Anakin. Yes, both Luke and Leia would lead the next generation of Jedi. As a new order was adopted, it would be called the Order of Skywalker. The Jedi were corrupt, and even Kenobi saw that in his old age. In the Order of Skywalker, people had the morals of the Jedi, but without the dogmatic strict code that allowed them to fall into desolation in the past. Yoda would also assist, but it wouldn't be more than a couple years before he died. But this time he would be surrounded by students and friends alike. Not long after Yoda's passing, the galaxy was brought peace for the first time since before the Clone Wars. And that is our stories, ladies and gentlemen. The first thing I want to address before any of you click off the video, I really wanted to do a new Force power here, and the Force power that I came up with was Force Veil. I don't know if it's a real canon or Legends ability, but essentially I wanted Ahsoka to be able to hide her ability or who she was in the darkness. She didn't actually commit herself to the darkness, and I really liked how the story went. Honestly, the story was a lot of fun. A lot of the time during the story, I wasn't sure how I wanted to end it. I was really convinced I was going to end it on a dark note, but at the end, I felt like the revelation that Ahsoka was who we know and love her to be, would be the best part of this video. And I think I stand right on that. I hope you guys agree with that. But I really wanted Ahsoka to be the hero that we know she is. Ahsoka's truly a hero, and she always has been a hero. That's just true to her character. It's a testament to her character, a testament to who she is and who we've seen her grow into throughout all the time that we watched her grow as we grew up ourselves. And I believe that this story is really, really kind of interesting because a little bit of change for her could have changed a lot of major effects in the galaxy. And I like the fact that she was consistently misleading the Empire without the Empire really knowing that she was doing it. And the best part is that she was also revealing information to the Rebels. It gives a little explanation for why the Rebels were so successful in Star Wars Rebels, and also gives reason for why the Rebels would succeed in the video that I have here. I really took a lot of inspiration from the original script from Duel of the Fates, the original episode 9 that was supposed to happen before Rise of the Sky Guy. I really liked that story, and I really wanted to bring it to life here, and I tried my best to do that. Obviously, I couldn't do it in movie form, and maybe someday Disney will hire me and we can do that. You guys talk about it in the comments all the time. I'm flattered by it, by the way. But, I mean, the thing that I really liked about this is that I was able to take inspiration from something and kind of make it my own. I wanted Palpatine to have a really cool duel with Ahsoka, and I wanted to admit that Palpatine is much stronger than both of them at this point. It's very obvious that Palpatine was more powerful than both of them. He's a very powerful duelist, and he's a very powerful Sith Lord. He's one of the most powerful in the history of the Sith Lord. But I really liked how this ended. I really like how I kind of took something from The Last Jedi and kind of made it work. I really like that part about The Last Jedi where they killed Snoke off, and that was kind of the intention here. I wanted Vader to kind of do the same thing because I thought that was kind of a badass move. It was hard to depict it without actually being able to ruin the surprise for you guys, because I wanted this story to be a little bit misleading. A lot of this story was misleading, and I wanted it to feel that way. The reason I did that is because I wanted to give a different type of storytelling. I'm always telling very straightforward stories, and this one I wanted to be a little bit confusing. I wanted you to be on the edge of your seats, not like you aren't already, but I wanted you to be ready for something to change at any point, because a lot of what I did here was tell you who these characters were and then flip them on their head, and that was the intention here. And I think that was the intention of Ahsoka using, as I call, Force Veal. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you did, leave a like down below. I worked a lot of really hard on this one. I spent all day working on it because I was like, I really want this to work because it's kind of confusing, but I wanted it to be really interesting for you guys. So I really hope you guys enjoyed. I love you all. Spread the love. Don't forget to join the Discord and subscribe to the channel for a chance to win a free lightsaber. Anyways, guys, always remember, may the Force be with you.